Chapter 11, White Dwarf's Castle. Austin recognized the voice which broke the silence, but suddenly the ravine seemed much larger than before. The rope bridge seemed 10 miles long. This was because at the end of the rope bridge was Alexis. She was calling to him. She was still in the nightgown she was wearing when she was captured. "Austin, it's me! Come to me!" she yelled in a sweet voice. Austin looked once more at the two lives that lay dead on the ground and stood up. He ran across the rope bridge. When he reached the other side, Alexis put out her hand. Instead of running toward him to give him a hug, lightning rushed through the air from her hands to Austin. The lightning reached him and he flew into the air. The bolts of lightning surrounded him. Alexis pulled the lightning bolts toward her along with Austin, but as he got closer to the figure of Alexis, it turned into White Dwarf. He let out a sinister laugh. "You are always easily fooled, Austin," he said, chuckling with his evil laugh. He put Austin on the ground. "Come, follow me," he said. "I will never follow you," Austin said, groaning in pain from the shock of the lightning. "You will follow me," he shouted in a booming voice. He sent out more lightning bolts toward Austin. Austin shouted in pain as the bolts pierced his body, sending electricity through his veins. "All right, I'll follow you," he uttered as White Dwarf stopped the bolts. "Good," the White Dwarf said, walking into the cave. Austin followed him. White Dwarf pulled out a candle and lit it. The cave barely lit up in the dim light of the flickering candle. Austin could faintly see the shape of a skull. Where the mouth was supposed to be, there was a door. White Dwarf opened the door. The door led to an enormous castle. He put the candle on a stand. More candles were lit. After 10 candles were lighting the whole main room, Austin could see the contents inside this castle. There were millions of books. There were ripped curtains. There were torn-up couches. In one corner there was a glass case. Inside the case was the body of a woman dressed in a black evening gown. Black roses were spread all over the glass coffin. "Who's that?" Austin asked, pointing to the glass coffin. "That is the love of my life. I found her dead when I was in a..." What? Sorry. "That is the love of my life. I found her dead when I was in powerful situations. I found her minutes after I got my powers. I named her Ivy after my mother. You are very lucky today, Austin," White Dwarf recited. "Why?" "You get to watch me sacrifice Alexis. After she is dead, I will have the power to bring Ivy back to life." Austin stared at him and quickly pulled out his sword. He pointed it at White Dwarf's neck. "Where is Alexis? Where is she?" he shouted, poking the tip of his sword into the flesh of White Dwarf's neck. "Well, she is right here," White Dwarf said. He then said a spell. Oh my god. He then said a spell, and one of the walls scooted out of its place. It began to turn. Lying on the floor was Alexis. She was wearing a black evening dress similar to the one Ivy was wearing that White Dwarf forced her to put on. It was for the sacrifice. There were chains around her wrists and ankles. "Alexis!" Austin shouted and ran toward her. "No, you don't!" White Dwarf shouted. He sent out lightning bolts from his hands. Austin cried with pain. Hearing the cries of Austin, Alexis lifted her head. "Austin, is that you?" She stood up. She tried to run toward him, but the chains served as an obstacle. "Let him go!" she shouted. White Dwarf dropped Austin to the ground. Austin shouted as he hit the stone floor. "Get up!" White Dwarf shouted. Austin stumbled onto his feet. "You won't be sacrificing anyone today," he said with confidence.